I had spent years investing everything I had into someone who never saw me for who I truly was. I thought we were building something real, a life, a future together. But what I didn't realize was that the man I loved, the one I had poured my money, time, and energy into, wasn't in love with me at all. He had just been using me. It all started with a question that I had asked so many times before, but this time, the answer broke me. I was standing in my apartment in Seoul, staring at the phone in my hand, when I called Jiwoo, the man I had believed would one day marry me. I had been dreaming of that moment for years, finally becoming his wife, being the one he could count on after everything we had been through. I had given him everything, my money, my heart, my soul. And I was waiting for that moment. The wedding. But when I asked, "When is the wedding, Jiwoo?" Minji, his wife, the woman I never thought would come between us, answered the phone. Her voice was sweet, almost sickeningly so. "We got married yesterday," she said casually, as if those words wouldn't shatter me into a million pieces. It was an intimate ceremony. Just the two of us and the witnesses. Just like that, I was cut out of a life I had been dreaming of. I wasn't even invited. All those years of giving him everything, every penny I saved up, every last cent I thought would secure my place in his world, wasted. I wasn't special. I wasn't enough. The words echoed in my mind like a drumbeat that wouldn't stop. "We got married yesterday." I couldn't even speak. I stood there in my living room, holding the phone, my heart sinking deeper with every second. I had spent the last few years supporting Jiwoo, paying off debts he owed, buying things he wanted, paying for his expensive lifestyle while I struggled to make ends meet. I believed that one day he would turn around and realize that I was the woman for him, that I had been by his side through everything. But nothing prepared me for this. I had been so foolish, thinking that love could be earned, thinking that if I gave enough, he would love me back. But now here I was, standing in my own home, broken, while he was living his life with someone else. And then, as if that wasn't enough, she called again, Minji. She needed money. They needed rent. The man I had been ready to marry, the one I had supported for so long, was now asking for more, after everything that had happened. "Arya," she said, her voice dripping with the same fake sweetness, "the rent is overdue. The landlord is pressuring us. You forgot to make the transfer." I could feel the anger rise within me, but I was calm. Too calm. "Minji," I said, each word heavier than the last, "didn't I tell you? I only help special people. And clearly, you and Jiwoo don't see me as special anymore." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. It was the first time in years that I had said no. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just the woman who always gave. This time, I was reclaiming my own worth. I wasn't a resource. I was a person. And I had been used. It felt strange, but liberating. As I hung up the phone, I knew that I was done being their ATM. I was done pretending that my love could be bought. They would never see me as anything more than a convenience. And I had wasted enough of my life on them. But even after that moment of clarity, the phone calls didn't stop. Jiwoo tried to reach me, and Minji kept texting. The desperation in their messages was palpable, but I didn't reply. I deleted every message. The silence felt so freeing. For the first time in years, I wasn't running to their aid. I wasn't chasing after someone who didn't even see me. But then, the unthinkable happened. I got a knock on my door. It was them, Jiwoo, Minji, and someone else. A lawyer. They had come to claim what they thought was rightfully theirs. I opened the door to find them standing there, looking at me with eyes full of entitlement. Minji's face was pale, but there was a hint of desperation in her eyes. Jiwoo, though, had the nerve to look at me with a mix of guilt and anger. "What is this?" I asked, already knowing what was coming. Minji spoke first, her voice trembling. "Arya, we need to talk. We have bills. You know we need your help." "I'm sorry," I said, voice firm. "You've made it clear that I'm not welcome in your life. And I've made it clear that I'm no longer financing your world." But they didn't take no for an answer. Jiwoo stepped forward. "Please, Arya. We're sorry. We just need a little more help. We're going through a rough patch." I looked at them, this time with no more pity. No more desire to fix what wasn't broken in the first place. This wasn't love. This was manipulation. I'm done, I said. I'm done being your lifeline. I've been a fool for thinking I needed to buy your love. But no more. But as I closed the door, I knew this wasn't the end. The battle had just begun. And the game they were playing wasn't just about money anymore. They were after something much more dangerous: control. Do you think I made the right choice by cutting them off? Or was I too harsh? Drop a comment below and let me know what you would have done. And don't forget to subscribe. This story is far from over, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Trust me, you won't believe the shocking twist I'm about to face. The restaurant was luxurious, decorated in gold and black tones, but it felt eerily cold to Arya as she sat across from Jinwoo. The table between them was pristine, too pristine. There was no warmth, no connection in the air, just the clinking of cutlery and the soft hum of distant chatter. Everything about this dinner felt like the end of something, though she didn't know yet if it would be the end of the relationship or the end of her illusions. She had chosen this restaurant, thinking it would be the perfect place for the two of them to have their last dinner together. They had shared so many meals, so many nights filled with laughter and passion. She had believed they were building a future. But now, as she looked at him, she realized she had been the only one doing the building. She had been the one investing in their future, paying off his debts, giving him everything she had, emotionally and financially. The guilt she felt when she first saw the pictures of his wedding had hit her like a wave. It wasn't just the pictures, it was the realization that she had been duped. She had been the fool all along. She stared at Jinwoo, noticing the way he sat there, calm and collected, as if nothing was wrong. His suit was immaculate, his demeanor perfect. But there was a coldness in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. She had been too blinded by love to notice how distant he had become. "Arya," he began, his voice smooth as always. "I know this must be hard for you to understand." "No," she interrupted, her voice shaking. "What's hard to understand is how I spent years giving everything I had, and you never told me you were already married." To her. He stiffened for a moment, then sighed. "It was a small, intimate ceremony," he said, as though that explanation should make everything better. "Just Minji, the witnesses, and me. We didn't want to make a big fuss, you know." Intimate ceremony. The words stung as they left his mouth. How could he say that with a straight face? Was that supposed to justify the years of silence? The lies? She had watched him build his empire, with her behind him the whole time, thinking one day it would be her at his side. She had imagined herself walking down the aisle with him. She had dreamed of their life together, their future. But none of that had ever been in his mind. The anger bubbled up inside her. "I've spent so much money on you," she said, barely able to keep the tears at bay. "I've paid off your debts, helped you build your business, and helped you maintain a lifestyle you couldn't afford. And you used me for all of that. You played me like a fool." Jinwoo leaned back in his chair, his eyes cold as he watched her. "Arya, you were never just a resource," he said, his voice still calm, as if he were talking to a child who didn't understand. "I appreciate everything you've done. But this was never about you. It was about what was best for both of us. Best for us." Arya's voice cracked with emotion. "What about me, Jinwoo? What about everything I gave you? The love I gave you? You didn't just take my money. You took my trust, my future, my hope. And now I see with her. Minji. The woman who's been living the life I thought would be mine." A long silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Arya wanted him to feel the weight of her words, wanted him to see the damage he had done. But as she looked at him, she realized something. He wasn't sorry. There was no regret in his eyes. Only calm. Indifference. It was like he had never truly cared. "Why didn't you tell me, Jinwoo?" Her voice broke, the dam finally breaking. "Why didn't you just be honest with me? I would have understood. I didn't ask for much. I just wanted you to love me back." Jinwoo's expression softened for just a moment, like he almost felt something. But then it was gone. "I didn't want to hurt you, Arya. But it was never about love. It was about convenience. I never expected you to understand, but I also didn't expect you to demand an explanation." Arya sat back in her chair, shocked. The man she had loved, the man she had spent years building a life for, just admitted that love had never been part of the equation. She had been living a lie. A lie so deep that even now, after everything, she still felt the sting of it. For the first time in her life, she felt like she could see him for who he truly was. A man who had never loved her. A man who had used her. And now, after everything, he was the one who had the audacity to sit there, so cold, so indifferent. "Minji," she said, her voice steady now. "She gets everything, doesn't she? She gets the wedding, the life, the family, while I get nothing. I gave you everything and all you gave me was lies." Jiwoo sighed, looking away for a moment before meeting her gaze again. "I'm sorry, Arya, but I never promised you anything. You chose this. You chose to give. You chose to be with me." Arya stood up, her hands trembling, but her resolve stronger than ever. "You're right. I chose. And I'm done choosing you." The betrayal was deeper than I ever imagined. But I wasn't going to let it break me. If Jiwoo thought he could walk away with everything, he was wrong. The truth was just beginning to come out. But what was I willing to lose to get it all back? If you've ever felt manipulated by someone you loved, I want to hear your story. Comment below and tell me what you would have done. And remember, you don't want to miss what happens next in this journey of heartbreak and empowerment. Subscribe, because this fight is far from over, and it's only getting started. Arya sat in her home office, the soft hum of her computer filling the silence. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, and her eyes were locked on the screen. She had never been one to back away from hard truths, but this was a different kind of pain. She pulled up the financial records, the ones she had kept meticulously over the years. The ones that now felt like a heavy weight dragging her down. Over $40,000. That was what she had spent on Jiwoo and Minji. Money she had worked hard for, money that was supposed to secure her future, but instead, it had been spent on building a life for them. A life that didn't include her. As her eyes scanned the numbers, each one felt like a betrayal. Rent payments, car loans, medical bills, trips she had financed so they could live comfortably while she went without. There were months where she couldn't even remember the last time she treated herself to something small, like a nice meal or a spa day. And for what? For them. For Jiwoo. The tears threatened to spill, but Arya wouldn't let them. She had cried enough. This was the moment of clarity she had been waiting for. This wasn't about love anymore. This was about control. She had let them take from her, and now it was time to take back what was hers. She leaned forward, her hand shaking as she grabbed her checkbook. She had been generous, too generous. She had given without asking for anything in return. She had thought that if she kept giving, if she kept being there for them, one day, Jiwoo would look at her and see her as more than just a source of financial support. But all he saw was a means to an end. A woman with money to burn. Arya sat back in her chair and let out a deep breath. She looked around her office, her space that had once felt like a sanctuary, and for the first time, it felt like a prison. Every document, every receipt, every bill she had paid for them was now a reminder of how she had been used. How foolish I was, she thought. But there was no time for self-pity. No time for regret. She had made her decision. This was the turning point. She couldn't keep doing this. She couldn't keep giving to people who didn't see her for who she was. Jiwoo and Minji had taken everything, and now she was taking it back. Arya wiped away a tear, not out of sadness, but out of pure, unrelenting anger. She had let them walk all over her for too long. She had let them treat her like an ATM, like a woman who existed to serve their needs. But not anymore. It wasn't just the money that hurt, it was the emotional cost. She had given Jiwoo her heart, thinking he would one day see her the way she had seen him. But that wasn't love. That was manipulation. She had been trapped in a cycle of giving, always hoping for something more, always expecting that one day he would come around and realize how much she had done for him. But now Arya knew. She had been waiting for a love that would never come. She closed her laptop and pushed back from her desk, standing up and walking over to the window. The city of Seoul stretched out before her, busy and full of life. But for the first time, Arya felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, hope. It was time to stop being a victim. It was time to stop being the one who always gave, who always sacrificed. She wasn't just going to sit back and watch Jiwoo and Minji live off her anymore. She was going to take control. She was going to build the life she deserved, a life where she was the one who mattered, where she was the one who was valued. But she couldn't do it alone. She had to be strong. And I will be, she thought. I will be stronger than I've ever been. Arya took a deep breath and walked out of her office, her mind made up. She would start by closing her bank accounts, by stopping the automatic payments. She would change her phone number. She would cut them off completely. But little did she know, this was only the beginning. Jiwoo wouldn't give up that easily. And neither would Minji. Arya's phone buzzed on the table, and for a split second, her heart skipped a beat. She didn't even need to look to know who it was. Jiwoo. With a shaky hand, she picked up the phone and stared at his name on the screen. He had no idea what was coming. Arya thought she had finally taken control of her life. She was ready to move on, to stop giving and start living. But what happens when Jiwoo refuses to let her go? When he shows up at her door, desperate and angry, demanding that she keep the promises she made. The real battle is just beginning, and Arya has no idea just how far Jiwoo is willing to go to keep her under his control. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, if you've ever felt like your kindness was used against you, I want to hear from you. Share your story in the comments below. And remember, this journey is far from over. Subscribe now because you won't want to miss what happens next. Arya is about to face her biggest challenge yet. This fight is personal. And it's just getting started. The phone rang, a shrill sound that pierced through the quiet of Arya's apartment. For a moment, she hesitated, staring at the screen. She knew who it was. Minji. The same woman who had robbed her of the love she thought was hers. The same woman who had stood in front of her, smiling sweetly while stealing the future Arya had dreamed of. But Arya had already made her decision. She wasn't the same woman who had blindly supported them for years. No more. No more saving them. She picked up the phone, her pulse quickening. But this time, there was no uncertainty, no wavering. Her heart was steady, her resolve unbreakable. She was done. Arya, Minji's voice crackled through the line, sounding forced, almost trembling. I need your help. Arya's grip tightened on the phone. Help? After everything, she had the audacity to call her for help? The woman who had humiliated her on the day of Jinwoo's wedding now needed her help? Help with what? Arya's voice was colder than she expected. She wasn't angry, at least, not anymore. She was beyond anger. She was beyond the pain. She was simply done. Minji took a deep breath before speaking again. It's the rent. We're a little behind this month, and the landlord's threatening to kick us out. I don't know who else to turn to. Please, Arya, we really need your help. Arya's chest tightened. She could already picture it. Jiwoo, lounging in his comfortable apartment, enjoying his life, while she had been the one who kept them afloat. It was always her. Always. She had been the one to cover their bills, their desires, their mistakes. And now, after everything, after the wedding, after the lies, she was supposed to be their savior once again? Her mind flashed back to that moment. The wedding photos, the joy in Minji's eyes as she posed with Jiwoo, the very moment Arya had realized that the years of her life, the years of her love, had been nothing more than a tool for them to use. She was no more than a resource. Not anymore. Arya took a slow, deliberate breath before speaking, her voice calm, but with a firm undercurrent of finality. Didn't I warn you, Minji? I only help special people. There was silence on the other end of the line. Arya could almost hear Minji's mind scrambling for an answer, but there was nothing. Minji's voice, usually sweet and smooth, cracked with shock, a sound Arya couldn't help but savor. But we've always been special to you, Arya, Minji said, desperation creeping in. Arya could feel the weight of her words as they left her mouth. No, you were never special to me. You were convenient. And now, you're nothing but a reminder of how much I've given and how little I've gotten in return. The truth stung. It burned in her chest, but it was the truth she needed to say. She needed to stop pretending. She had given so much, her love, her support, her money, and it had never been enough for them. She wasn't going to be their ATM anymore. Minji stayed silent, and for a moment, Arya thought the conversation was over. But then, Minji spoke again, softer now. Arya, please. You're like a second mother to me. Don't you care about us? We can't do this without you. The words pierced through Arya's chest, but this time, they didn't hit the same way they used to. The old Arya would have softened, would have been manipulated by those words. But not now. Not anymore. Arya's heart was no longer for sale. No, Minji. I'm not your mother, and I'm certainly not your financial savior. If you truly needed me, you would have treated me better. You would have respected me. But all you've done is use me. And I'm done letting you. There was a long pause. Arya could hear Minji's breathing, shaky and uncertain, but there was no turning back. Arya had drawn her line in the sand. I'm sorry, Minji, Arya said, her voice firm but no longer cold. But I can't help you anymore. I'll never be your fallback again. With that, she hung up the phone. The silence that followed was deafening. But for the first time in years, Arya felt relief. She had said what needed to be said. She had stood up for herself. And yet, the phone call wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something else. The beginning of Arya's fight. Do you think Arya did the right thing by cutting them off? Or did she make a mistake? If you've ever felt trapped in a relationship where you gave everything, only to realize it was never truly valued, you're not alone. Comment below and share your thoughts. Let's talk about it. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Because Arya's journey isn't over. In fact, it's only getting started. What happens when Jiwoo refuses to let her go? When he does everything in his power to make her regret her decision? The hardest battles are the ones fought for your own worth. Arya is about to face a storm she never saw coming, and you won't want to miss it. Subscribe now and be part of this powerful journey. Arya sat in her living room, the soft glow of the afternoon sun spilling through the windows. It felt like the first time in years that she had the space to just breathe. The weight on her chest, the constant pressure of expectations, of giving until she had nothing left, all of it, was finally lifting. She was no longer a prisoner to the needs of Jiwoo and Minji. For the first time in a long time, she was living for herself. She looked around the room. The very room she had once decorated to impress them, filled with expensive furniture she had bought for them, gifts that were never returned. Everything in her life had been about making them comfortable, about ensuring they wanted for nothing. But now, the walls didn't feel like a cage anymore. They felt like a refuge. A place she could reclaim. Arya stood up, walking over to her desk where her bank statements lay scattered. It felt surreal, finally seeing them for what they truly were. Tools of manipulation. All the payments, all the money that had drained from her account, from her future, was now just a painful reminder of the lies she had allowed herself to believe. But she wasn't angry anymore. She was resolute. No more. She grabbed her phone, dialing the bank. She needed to cancel everything, every automatic transfer, every link that tied her to them. Her hands trembled only for a second, but she gripped the phone tightly. This was her moment. Her decision. Hello, Arya? The bank representative's voice came through, calm and professional. How may I assist you today? I need to cancel all automatic payments linked to my account, Arya said, her voice steady. I also want to change my account details and add extra security to ensure that no one can access it without my permission. She could hear the surprise in the representative's voice. That's a rather significant change, ma'am. Are you sure? Arya smiled softly to herself. She was sure. More sure than she had ever been in her life. Yes, she said, her tone unshakable. I'm sure. It felt like an act of defiance, like she was finally taking back what was rightfully hers. Her money. Her time. Her heart. She hadn't realized how much power she had been giving away until now. As the representative confirmed the changes, Arya leaned back in her chair, taking a deep breath. The relief was almost immediate. For the first time in years, she wasn't scrambling to please someone else. She wasn't living for anyone's approval but her own. She had cut the strings, and it felt freeing. But as the days went on, she began to notice a shift in herself. She wasn't just reclaiming her finances, she was reclaiming her identity. The woman who had spent so many years living in the shadow of Jiwoo and Minji was fading away. And in her place, a stronger version of herself was emerging. Arya started taking long walks in the evenings, something she hadn't done in years. The city of Seoul, bustling with energy, no longer felt like a place she was trapped in. It felt like a place where she could thrive. She passed the same streets, but this time, she saw them with fresh eyes. She wasn't weighed down by guilt or resentment anymore. She was free to decide what mattered. Free to finally take care of herself. The days turned into weeks, and as Arya continued to reorganize her life, a thought kept creeping into her mind. What would they do when they realized I was serious? She had no idea what to expect from Jiwoo or Minji. She wasn't sure if they would simply give up, or if they would try to manipulate her again, use guilt to drag her back into their web. But no matter what happened, she knew one thing for sure: she wouldn't go back to who she was. She couldn't. Arya walked into her bedroom and stared at herself in the mirror. There was a woman in front of her she didn't recognize at first. The woman who had spent years hiding behind her love for someone who didn't deserve it. But now she saw strength in her reflection. There was power in her eyes that she hadn't seen in years. And for the first time in a long time, Arya realized that she had the ability to build her life the way she wanted it, not for anyone else, but for herself. The phone rang. She picked it up without hesitation, but her heart skipped when she saw who was calling. Jiwoo. Her mind flashed back to the way he had looked at her when he'd told her the wedding was small, when he'd dismissed everything she had done for him with those cold words. He had no idea what was coming. With a deep breath, Arya answered the phone. "Hello, Arya." Jinwoo's voice was smooth as always. But it was different this time. His tone was softer, more desperate. "Arya, we need to talk. We've been trying to reach you. She's upset. She wants to make things right between us." Arya's eyes narrowed. Make things right? They had crossed a line she could never come back from. And now, when they realized their financial lifeline had been cut off, they wanted to fix everything? Too late. "I've already made my decision, Jiwoo," Arya said, her voice calm but firm. "There's nothing to fix. I'm done." There was a long pause on the other end, the silence stretching long enough for Arya to feel the weight of his shock. But she didn't let it affect her. This was the new Arya, strong, unshakable, and no longer willing to be anyone's doormat. "I'm not coming back," she said quietly, and before he could respond, she hung up. Arya took a deep breath, steadying herself. This was her moment. No more walking on eggshells, no more waiting for someone to appreciate her. She was finally living for herself. But even though Arya had taken control, could she really escape the grasp of Jiwoo and Minji? How far would they go to get her back, and what lengths would they take to destroy her newfound independence? If you've ever had to fight to take your life back, or if you've been in a relationship where your love was used against you, I want to hear your story. Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Arya's journey is just beginning, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. There's a storm coming, and Arya is about to find out just how far people will go when they realize they can't control you anymore. This is only the beginning. And it's going to be a fight like no other. Arya sat at a small table in the corner of a cozy coffee shop, the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. The noise of the bustling street outside faded into the background as she sipped on her latte, trying to steady her nerves. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind, cutting off Jiwoo and Minji, reclaiming her finances, and making decisions that had felt impossible before. She had stood up for herself, but it still felt like a storm was brewing inside her. Across from her sat Yoonji, her close friend and mentor. Yoonji had seen Arya at her lowest. They had shared countless late-night conversations, and Yoonji had always been there, offering wisdom and guidance when Arya needed it most. But today, the look in Yoonji's eyes was different. It wasn't just concern, it was pride. "How are you holding up?" Yoonji asked, her voice soft but steady. Arya took another sip of her coffee, avoiding her friend's gaze for a moment. I'm still adjusting. It feels like I'm waiting for something to go wrong. Like they'll find a way back into my life, somehow. Yoonji nodded, understanding exactly what Arya meant. You've been living for them for so long, Arya. It's hard to just let go. But what's harder is realizing that you've been living for the wrong people. Arya looked up, meeting Yoonji's gaze. It's hard to shake the guilt, you know? I loved him. I wanted to build a life with him. And now, I'm left with nothing but regret. Yoonji smiled, her eyes warm with empathy. The problem isn't that you loved him, Arya. The problem is that you loved him more than you loved yourself. You gave him everything. But he was never going to give you the same in return. Arya felt a lump form in her throat. The truth was hard to hear, but deep down, she knew it was exactly what she needed to hear. She had spent so much of her life bending over backward for people who never valued her. Jiwoo, Minji. They were never going to give her the love she deserved. They had used her, and she had allowed it. You've been fighting to be seen for so long, Yoonji continued. But what about seeing yourself? What about giving yourself the love you've been giving to everyone else? Arya sat back, her mind racing. She hadn't thought about it like that before. She had spent so much time trying to make others happy, trying to fill the gaps in their lives, that she had forgotten to fill her own. She had been waiting for Jiwoo to appreciate her, for Minji to recognize her sacrifices, but all she had really done was drain herself dry. It's time to stop, Yoonji said, her voice firm but kind. It's time to stop letting them drain you. You have to say no. And not just to them, but to anyone who isn't honoring your worth. Arya nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of those words. Say no. The idea of saying no, especially to the people she loved, was terrifying. But at the same time, it felt like the only thing left to do. She couldn't keep living for others. She couldn't keep sacrificing herself for people who didn't care about her in the same way. I've been scared to say no, Arya admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. What if they stop talking to me? What if they leave me behind completely? Yoonji leaned forward, her eyes full of compassion. You're not losing them, Arya. You're losing the version of them that has only existed in your mind. The one where you're just there to please them. Saying no doesn't mean they're gone. It means you finally get to show up for yourself. Arya's breath caught in her throat. She was right. All this time, she had been holding onto the idea of Jiwoo and Minji, convinced that if she just gave enough, they would love her back. But what if she didn't need them to love her anymore? What if she loved herself first? She felt a surge of emotion rise up in her chest, a mix of fear, sadness, and relief. Saying no meant she was taking her power back. It meant she was no longer a victim of their manipulations. Okay, Arya said, her voice stronger now. I'm ready. I can't keep living like this. Yoonji smiled, her pride for Arya shining through. Good. You've got this. And remember, it's okay to say no to the things and people who don't serve you. It's okay to choose yourself for once. Arya took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her decision settle in. She was finally ready to move forward. No more bending over backward for people who didn't appreciate her. No more sacrificing her happiness for the approval of others. As she left the coffee shop, a new sense of purpose filled her. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but it was hers to walk. She was finally taking control. But just as she thought she had everything figured out, her phone buzzed with a message. Her heart skipped when she saw the name at the top of the screen, Jiwoo. Is it too late for Arya to finally break free from Jinwa's hold? Or will he do everything in his power to pull her back into his web? She's made a choice, but will it be enough to keep him from coming back into her life? If you've ever had to learn the hard way to say no, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your experience. And don't forget to hit subscribe. Arya is about to face the consequences of her decision, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. The fight for freedom is never easy. But for Arya, it's just beginning. Arya wasn't expecting company. Her apartment was quiet, peaceful even. As she sat on the couch sipping her tea, the weight of the world a little lighter with each passing day. For the first time in a long time, She felt like she was finally breathing on her own terms, free from the manipulation, free from the guilt, free from the chains she had carried for so long. But then, there was a knock on her door. It wasn't the usual friendly tap from a neighbor or the delivery man with packages. No, this knock was too firm, too demanding. Her heart skipped. She already knew who it was, even before she stood up and made her way to the door. Jiwoo and Minji. Arya hesitated for a moment, standing still by the door. She had made her decision. She had cut them off. She wasn't going to go back to being their financial savior. She wasn't going to go back to being used. But even knowing all of this, the sight of them standing on the other side of the door sent a shock through her. She opened the door slowly, and there they were. Jinwoo's face was hard, no longer the charming, easy smile he used to greet her with. Minji was standing just behind him, her face pale and pinched with frustration. They looked like a picture of entitlement, as if they were still owed something. Arya stood in the doorway, feeling the old familiar pressure rise in her chest. She was tempted to let them in, to hear what they had to say, but she quickly reminded herself no. This wasn't the same woman who had been too afraid to stand up to them. This was the new Arya, the one who had found her voice, the one who was no longer afraid to be the villain in their story. "What do you want?" Arya asked, her voice calm but firm. She didn't let them in, didn't invite them to sit. This time, she was in control. Jinwoo's eyes flashed with anger, but he quickly masked it with a forced calm. "Arya, you need to stop this," he said, his voice too smooth, too practiced. "This behavior, it's unreasonable." Arya's jaw clenched, and she met his gaze with a cold stare. "Unreasonable? I'm unreasonable? After everything you've done? You and Minji have taken advantage of me for years. I supported both of you, gave you everything, and this is how you repay me." Minji shifted uncomfortably, looking away as if she didn't want to be a part of this confrontation, but she was, and Arya wouldn't let her hide. "Arya," she spoke up, her voice almost pleading. "You know we didn't mean to hurt you. We needed your help. You were always there for us." Arya's eyes hardened, and she stepped back from the door slightly, leaning against the frame. "Needed my help," she repeated, her voice steady but laced with bitterness. "I wasn't your help, Minji. I was your crutch. You and Jinwoo both used me to get ahead. And now that I've said no, you're angry. Well, guess what? I don't owe you anything anymore." Jinwoo's expression darkened. He stepped forward, his presence intimidating as he moved into her space. His usual charm was gone, replaced by something colder, something more dangerous. "You're being emotional, Arya." "Too distant," he said, his voice dropping to a low, insistent tone. "You're letting your feelings cloud your judgment. You're hurting us by doing this. Don't you care about us at all? After everything we've been through together." Arya felt her pulse quicken, the familiar rush of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. But she held steady. She couldn't let them manipulate her again. She couldn't be swayed by his voice, by his charm. It was all just a game to him, a game she had been playing for too long. "You're right about one thing," Arya said, her voice sharp as she stood taller, letting her newfound strength seep into her every word. "I'm distant, and I'm finally seeing you for who you really are. You don't care about me, Jinwoo. You never did. You cared about what I could give you. And I'm done." The silence between them grew thick, heavy with the weight of her words. Jinwoo stared at her for a long moment, as if he couldn't comprehend what she was saying. But the expression in his eyes was telling: anger, frustration, and something else. Maybe it was fear. Fear of losing control over her, of losing the grip he had held on her life for so long. "Don't do this, Arya," Minji whispered, her voice cracking. "We're family. You can't just walk away from us." Arya shook her head, her heart no longer torn. She was finally free. "No, you're not my family. You were never my family. You've always just been people I've been forced to take care of. But I'm done now. I've said no." Jinwoo's face twisted with anger, his hand balling into a fist. "You'll regret this," he spat, his voice low and threatening. "You think you're in control now? You have no idea what you've just done. You're making a huge mistake, Arya." Arya stood her ground, refusing to let him intimidate her. She was done being scared. Done being the one who always gave, always sacrificed. This was her life now, and she wasn't going to let them ruin it anymore. "I'm not scared of you, Jiwoo," she said, her voice unwavering. "And I'm not going to regret anything. You've already taken enough from me. Now, it's my turn to take something back." With that, she turned and walked back into her apartment, leaving them standing at the door. As she closed it behind her, the finality of it hit her. She was free. The life she had lived with them was over, and the woman standing in front of her mirror, looking back with determination, was someone she could finally respect. But even as the door clicked shut, she could feel it. The storm wasn't over yet. Jiwoo wasn't going to let her go that easily. Jiwoo and Minji are furious, and Arya knows this isn't the end. But can she hold her ground, or will they find a way to break her resolve? The war for her freedom has just begun, and Arya is about to face a battle that will test everything she's learned. If you've ever stood up for yourself against someone who tried to control you, I want to hear your story. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe. Arya is about to face a storm she didn't see coming. This fight is far from over. Her strength is growing, but will it be enough to protect her from the ones who want to take everything from her? The park was quiet, a peaceful haven amidst the chaos of Seoul. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows on the walking path, and the rustling of the leaves seemed to echo in Arya's ears. She had walked this path many times before, but today, everything felt different. She felt different. For the first time in a long time, she was alone, but not in the way she had feared. She wasn't alone because she had been abandoned. She was alone because she had chosen herself. She had made the decision to walk away from a toxic, draining relationship, to stop being someone's emotional and financial crutch. And as she walked through the park, the weight she had been carrying for years finally began to lift. The emotional scars were still there, etched deeply in her heart. She could still remember the sleepless nights, the lies, the manipulation. The feeling of being unseen and unappreciated, no matter how much she gave. But today, those scars no longer controlled her. They didn't define her. With every step, Arya realized something more profound. She was in charge of her future now. She stopped at a bench, sitting down and looking out over the park. It was quiet, peaceful, and in the stillness, she let her mind wander back to when she had been with Seokjin. She had loved him so deeply, believed in their future so fiercely. But looking back now, she could see the truth. The affection she had longed for from him, the love she had convinced herself he was capable of, it wasn't love at all. It was manipulation. He had used her vulnerabilities to his advantage, played on her deepest fears and desires, making her believe that her sacrifices would be rewarded with his love. But that was never the case. Arya closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, feeling the cool breeze against her skin. It was as if she were letting go of the past with each exhale. All the lies, all the guilt, all the self-doubt, it didn't define her anymore. She defined herself now. For the first time in years, she felt whole. No longer dependent on someone else's validation. No longer seeking approval from a man who had never truly cared for her. No longer a pawn in someone else's game. She was free. The realization hit her like a wave. She had the power. The power to choose who she spent her energy on. The power to decide what mattered in her life. She didn't need Seokjin's approval or Minji's sympathy. She had spent too many years living for others, bending over backward to make them happy while sacrificing her own happiness. And she had paid the price for it. But now she was going to build a life where she was the priority. She stood up from the bench, feeling the weight of her decision in her bones. It wasn't going to be easy, and she knew there would be more challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long time, she felt ready. Ready to face the world on her own terms. As she began walking again, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, expecting another message from Jiwoo or Minji, but instead, it was a message from a friend. It was brief, just a quick check-in, but as Arya read the words, something in her shifted again. "You've got this, Arya. You're stronger than you think. It wasn't much, but it was all she needed to hear. Sometimes, it took someone else's belief in you to remind you of your own strength. Arya smiled to herself, tucking the phone back into her pocket. She was strong. She had always been strong. But now, she was finally ready to show the world and herself what she was capable of. And as she walked through the park, the world didn't seem as daunting anymore. It was hers for the taking. Arya's journey is far from over. She's finally found her strength, but will Ji-woo and Minji let her go that easily? What happens when they realize she's not the same woman they used to manipulate? Will they try to tear her down once again? If you've ever had to fight to take your power back, if you've ever had to learn that your worth isn't defined by anyone but you, I want to hear your story. Comment below and share your experience. Let's talk about what it means to reclaim our lives. And don't forget to hit subscribe. Arya's fight for her independence is just beginning, and you won't want to miss what comes next. The hardest battles are often the ones we fight for ourselves, and Arya is about to face a challenge that will test everything she's learned. This is her moment, but will she be able to hold on to it? Arya sat in the sterile, cold room of the legal office, her hands tightly gripping the edges of the chair. She hadn't expected this, not this. She had known the fight wasn't over, but this was a betrayal she never saw coming. Her lawyer, Mr. Lee, sat across from her, flipping through the papers with a furrowed brow. He had always been professional, calm, but today, even he seemed tense. He finally looked up at Arya, his face grave. "Arya," he said softly, "you need to brace yourself. They've filed a lawsuit." Arya's stomach dropped. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but she forced the words out. "A lawsuit? What are they trying to do now?" Mr. Lee slid the papers across the table toward her. "They've filed to have you declared mentally incompetent. They're saying that you can no longer manage your own finances, that you're not fit to make decisions about your own life." The words hit Arya like a punch to the gut. Mentally incompetent? Her own son and his wife were now trying to strip away her autonomy, her dignity, and her right to live on her terms. After everything, after all the sacrifices she had made for them, this was how they repaid her? Her hands shook as she picked up the papers, scanning the official language, terms and phrases designed to make her seem weak, incapable, a woman no longer in control of her own destiny. The betrayal stung worse than any of the lies they had told. "They're doing this because I cut them off, aren't they?" Arya's voice trembled, the anger rising in her chest. "Because I said no. Because I stopped letting them use me." Mr. Lee nodded, his expression sympathetic. "Yes. They're trying to manipulate the situation to their advantage. They want to make you appear irrational, unfit to handle your finances, so they can take control of your assets. This is their way of punishing you for taking your power back." Arya's heart pounded in her chest. Punishing me. That's what this was. It wasn't about protecting her. It wasn't about her well-being. This was about control they had lost when she stopped being their financial lifeline. She sat back in the chair, trying to process everything. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a calculated, cruel move to rob her of everything she had worked for, everything she had fought for. And now she was being forced to defend her own sanity, her own autonomy, her own existence. Arya closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. No. She wouldn't let them do this to her. She wouldn't let them take what was rightfully hers. Mr. Lee's voice broke through her thoughts. "We'll fight this, Arya. I've already looked into their claims, and it's weak. They don't have the evidence to back it up. But I need you to stay focused. This is going to get ugly." She opened her eyes, locking gazes with him. "I'm ready. I won't let them win. I've fought too hard to get here, and I'm not going to let them strip that away from me." Her hands were still shaking, but this time, it wasn't fear, it was the anger that had been building up inside her for so long. She had spent so much of her life bending over backwards, trying to please them, trying to make them see her worth. And now, they were trying to destroy everything she had fought for. "They think they can break me," Arya muttered, more to herself than to Mr. Lee. "But they're wrong. I won't let them." He nodded, his confidence a steady anchor in the storm of emotions swirling inside her. "We'll make sure they can't. But it's going to take everything you've got. You'll need to stand your ground and show them that you are not the woman they think you are. Arya straightened up in her chair, the fire in her chest igniting once again. I've been standing my ground for a long time, Mr. Lee. I'm not going to stop now. Underscore 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 underscore. Arya left the office feeling a mix of dread and determination. The world outside seemed to blur as she walked to her car, the weight of the lawsuit pressing heavily on her shoulders. She had never imagined that Ji-woo and Minji would go this far. She had expected anger, even retaliation, but this was more than she had ever anticipated. She sat in her car for a moment, taking deep breaths, her hands still shaking. But the more she thought about it, the more her resolve solidified. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was a battle for her life, her identity, her future. She had spent too many years allowing them to take what they wanted. She had let them control her for so long, but not anymore. She wasn't the woman they could manipulate. She wasn't the woman who would let them decide her worth. The door to her past was slamming shut, and she was standing in front of a new door. A door that led to a future she was going to build on her own terms. But there was one thing Arya couldn't ignore. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about proving to herself that she was strong enough to stand up to the people who had once held her down. And the more she thought about it, the more one thought kept running through her mind. They thought they had control over her, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. Arya is about to face the fight of her life. Ji-woo and Minji's betrayal has taken a dark turn, and they're trying to tear her down in the most vicious way possible. But will Arya's newfound strength be enough to protect herself from their schemes? If you've ever had to fight for your independence, if you've ever had to stand your ground against someone who tried to take away your power, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your story. And don't forget to subscribe. Arya's journey is just heating up, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The hardest battles are the ones we fight for ourselves. Arya is about to prove that she's stronger than anything they can throw at her. The courtroom was cold, the air thick with tension. Arya sat at the defendant's table, the weight of the moment settling over her like a heavy cloak. She had spent so much of her life trying to please others, trying to make them love her, to see her worth. But today, this was about her. Today was the day she was going to stand up for herself, once and for all. She looked across the room at Ji-woo and Minji, who were sitting together on the opposite side. They both wore expressions of calculated calm, their faces as cool as ever. But Arya could see the tension in their eyes, the thinly veiled desperation. They had underestimated her. They had thought they could break her down, manipulate her into submission. But they hadn't reckoned with the woman she had become. Arya's lawyer, Mr. Lee, stood beside her, his voice steady and confident as he addressed the court. He had prepared a rock-solid defense, filled with evidence of Arya's mental clarity and financial independence. She wasn't the unstable woman they were trying to paint her as. No, she was a woman who had found her strength, her voice, and now she was ready to fight for her dignity. The prosecutor called Ji-woo to the stand first. He sat there, his usual charm replaced by a cold, calculated demeanor. He began his testimony, painting a picture of Arya as a woman who had spiraled into irrationality. He spoke about her unpredictable behavior and how she had suddenly cut off all financial support. He even mentioned her recent emotional instability, all while casting a glance toward Minji, who nodded along in agreement. Arya's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't flinch. She knew this was their strategy. They wanted to make her appear weak, unfit to manage her own life. They wanted to strip away everything she had worked for. But she wasn't going to let them get away with it. When it was finally Arya's turn to take the stand, she stood up slowly, taking a deep breath. As she made her way to the witness box, she could feel all eyes on her, but this time, she wasn't afraid. She had been afraid once, when she thought she needed Jinwoo's approval. She had been afraid when she thought her worth was tied to their love and loyalty. But not anymore. She took her seat, her hands steady as she placed them on the table. She glanced at Jiwoo and Minji, their eyes now cold and unforgiving, but she didn't let them intimidate her. She wasn't here to beg for their approval. She was here to take back her life. "Ms. Arya," the judge said, his voice neutral but commanding. "You may begin your testimony." Arya looked up, meeting the judge's gaze, and for the first time, she felt a sense of peace. She was in control now. This was her story, her truth, and she wasn't going to let anyone rewrite it. "I have spent years living in a shadow," Arya began, her voice clear and steady. "I gave my love, my time, my money to people who never appreciated me. I thought that if I gave enough, they would see me for who I really was, but instead, I became nothing more than a tool to be used. I allowed myself to be manipulated by people I trusted. And when I finally found the courage to stop, to say no, they tried to tear me down." She paused, her breath steadying as she glanced at Jiwoo and Minji. "I am not mentally incompetent. I am not irrational. I am a woman who has finally taken control of her own life. And if you think I'm going to let you take that away from me, you're wrong." Her words echoed in the courtroom, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of doubt cross Jinwoo's face. He had expected her to crumble. He had expected her to back down. But Arya wasn't the same woman he had manipulated all those years. As the court session continued, Mr. Lee methodically dismantled their claims. He presented evidence of Arya's clear financial records, her stable mental health evaluations, and her strong, consistent decision-making over the past months. She wasn't the person they were trying to portray. She was someone who had been broken, but now, she was rebuilding herself, piece by piece. Finally, after what felt like hours, the judge gave his ruling. Arya held her breath, her heart pounding. "Please," she thought. "Please let this be the end of it." "The court finds in favor of Ms. Arya," the judge said, his voice firm. "The petition for mental incompetency is dismissed. Ms. Arya has demonstrated her ability to manage her finances and make sound decisions regarding her own life. This case is closed." Arya felt the breath she had been holding leave her body in a rush. She had won. The weight of the world seemed to lift from her shoulders in that single moment. For the first time in years, she felt a true sense of freedom. As she stood up from the witness box, she could hear the soft murmurs of the courtroom. But all that mattered was the quiet thrum of her own heartbeat, the steady pulse of her victory. She had stood up for herself, and she had won. Walking out of the courtroom, Arya felt a sense of peace settle over her. She was no longer the woman who had been trapped by the expectations of others. She was free. Free to live her life on her own terms. Free to love herself first. But even as she walked out, she knew the battle wasn't over. Jiwoo and Minji weren't going to just disappear. They were still out there, still angry, still trying to find a way to regain control over her. She wasn't done fighting. Not by a long shot. Arya's victory in the courtroom is just the beginning. With Jiwoo and Minji defeated in this legal battle, what lengths will they go to next? Will they finally let her go, or will their obsession with control push them to dangerous extremes? If you've ever fought for your independence, if you've ever faced people who tried to tear you down, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your story. And don't forget to subscribe. Arya's journey is far from over, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. She's just getting started, and the fight ahead will test everything she's learned.